many times previously. Okay. So then at the beginning, when we're doing the prostrations, we do this mantra, Om Namo Manjushri Nama Sushri Nama Uttamashriye Saha. You won't always hear that being recited. It's a multiplying mantra. So it's said that by saying that mantra every time you prostrate, then it's like you're prostrating 100,000 times, or to 100,000 Buddha Dhamma, however you want to see it. So Namo is homage, paying homage. So that's what you'll see, Namo. And then Manjushriye. So Manjushri is, the Buddha Manjushri is representative of gentle speech and the gentle one. So it's, literally the glorious, peaceful one. So that's actually an epithet for the Buddha. So saying, I'm paying homage to the Buddha. And then Su means noble or good, and Shri is glorious. So the noble, good, glorious Dharma. So prostrating to the Dharma. And Uttamashriye is glorious, unsurpassed, like that. So that's making prostration to the Arya Sangha. So we'll be looking at that a bit today, just to get a sense of that. So, yeah, so reciting the whole mantra like that, and think, well, we recited it at least 3 times. So just think that we're massively multiplying all the benefits of prostrating, which there's many benefits. We could go into that at another time. There's many benefits of prostrations, like you're creating the cause to have that glorious golden body of a Buddha. Maybe Australians are good at that. We talk about, golden skin, don't we? Well, unless it goes red, in my case. Maybe Amitabha Buddha. Just joking. So, okay. So, and when we have the practice of the prostrations to the 35 Buddhas, that's something we can look at it in the next module, establishing a daily practice. Then that has a number of different mantras that we recite, because then it multiplies more and more and more the practice. So we're all into multiplying the benefits of everything that we do. Yes.
I noticed also that Geshe Zopa does the mantra on the way down and then on the way back up. So he does double.
Yeah. And if you do it, yes, that's right. And he chants it slowly, whereas I've been doing it just on the way down. But another thing you can do, and this I picked up from Geshe Zopa as well, is just recite it continuously, the whole time that you're prostrating. So you can do it many different ways. Okay. All right. So I think there was a request for explanation of that. I hope it was one of you here.
It was me.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Okay, so today we're looking at the jewels, or the rare sublime ones, the teacher and the community, the Buddha and the Sangha. So we looked previously in a little bit more detail at the Dharma, because really it's the Dharma jewel. If we're not going to hear teaching anything else, the Dharma jewel is the one that is going to get us enlightened, because the Buddha laid out everything, all the teachings, all the things to study and to contemplate, how to meditate on, and so forth. So we looked at that just in summary last week. Okay, so then the Buddha and the spiritual community as being sources of inspiration, that we read biographies of past great holy beings and we are inspired. Like, how could you possibly have done that? You read Lama Tsongkhapa, how did you do, sort of 3.5 million prostrations outside on the rocks and wore down actually the stone. So this was on a retreat at Walker with 8 of his close disciples and doing that. and all the mandala offerings, plus studying all the different Tibetan traditions, being expert at that, and then, you know, developing the most refined view of the middle way consequence school, like, or at least presenting it in a way so that it became clarified. So unpacking all of the Lamrim in great detail, and Tantra and so forth, just so much, and building monasteries, and statues, creating Monlam prayer festivals, which we still do today, or at least in India, they do. So you read the biographies like that and go, okay, this was in a human lifetime. I mean, you read it of the Buddha, and this was in a human lifetime. How do you achieve all of that? Right? So the Buddha jewel, so the Buddha is seen then as a teacher, of course, because we got all of these teachings that we have here directly from the Buddha. And, you know, Buddha Shakyamuni, it said that we have a karmic connection with this particular Buddha. It's the Buddha of this eon, and the great fortune that this Buddha taught. So here we had recently Chokyi Duchen, Chokyi, you know, the turning of the wheel. So it's celebration of the turning of the wheel. And that was, we were blessed with Geshe Zopa's presence for that. And Geshe-la, that was on the Friday night, Geshe-la gave a extensive teaching there in relation to, in particular, the qualities of the Buddha. So that's now available, the recording of that's now available. So it's good to, you know, sort of listen more, read more about the qualities of the Buddha, because they're infinite. So we can only talk about really a summary. So we're talking about, you know, the lifetime of the historical Buddha that displayed basically how to go from, well, an ordinary life if you live a palatial existence, but how to go from wealth to no wealth, but to the wealth of the Dharma. So from external worldly concerns to inner richness, really. So the, you know, so turning that wheel of Dharma, and if we think about that, you know, that day also celebrates the beginning of Sangha, of ordained Sangha. So we also celebrate that on the day. So we're looking at these two. So the Buddha means awake. That's what the Buddha said when, you know, he became enlightened, and then after his 7 weeks of practices around the Bodhi tree, around that area, then going seeking for those to teach, having been requested by the Devas to teach. And when he encountered that person who first asked, what are you? God? No, a human? No, extraterrestrial being? No, I'm awake. So that sense of all the veils of the delusions being lifted. So we have this quality of the Buddha Sangha, of having completely eliminated all the afflictions and their imprints, so that all the deluded states of mind, all the confusion, wrong views, jealousies, pride, and anger, and so forth, completely eliminated, so it can never arise, completely purity of mind. And alongside that, having fully completed all the good qualities that there are, you know, so this magnificence. And then we see that in this form of stylized form of the Buddha. So, yeah. So looking at the Buddha as source of inspiration. So the idea is to follow in the footsteps. And there have been a number of pilgrimages that are called In the Footsteps of the Buddha, going to all the significant sites of Lumbini, where the Buddha was born, of where the Buddha first taught, or became enlightened by Gaia, of where the Buddha taught in Shravasti, Deer Park, of where the Buddha taught, you know, that first turning of the wheel, and then second turning of the wheel on the Perfection of Wisdom sutras. So like Heart Sutra and so forth, we're familiar with it. Vulture's Peak at Rajagriha. So that's why it says in the Heart Sutra, thus did I hear at one time. And that the Buddha and the Arya Sangha were there at Vulture's Peak. So it's telling you the place where those teachings were given, alongside the tantric teachings being given at the same time in Amaravati, Kalachakra teachings. This possible, it's very efficient to give all these different teachings at the same time. And then we have many deeds of the Buddha, but also passing into parinirvana, in other words, leaving the human body behind. No need for that body, but continuing to teach. At Kushinagar, and then in the meantime, having gone to Shida God realm to teach his mother, and so we celebrate that in around November when the Buddha descends from Tushita. It says God realm of the 33, so that's where she was, and then descending to teach in this world. Even the Buddha being born, when the Buddha was born, before the Buddha took birth, it passed on the crown in Ganden, in Maitreya's Pure Land, Tushita, Ganden, Pure Land, and passed on the crown, is said to Maitreya. You're next. You look after this place. Yeah. Okay, so recalling, and so the idea of doing pilgrimage, the Buddha said, encourage that people do pilgrimage to be able to bring to mind, respect and admiration for the qualities of the Buddha, not from the Buddha's side, but for our benefit. So if you've been to any Buddha sites, you'll know that the power of those places. I haven't yet been to Shravasti, where the Buddha gave the teachings on the Four Noble Truths and set the wheel of Dharma in motion in this world, but those who've gone said that you're there and your mind is completely peaceful. It's exquisite, like the air is exquisite. And this is like 2,600 years later. It was also where the Buddha did, and his close disciples did 25 years rains retreat, so, which is what our Theravadan friends are doing at the moment, rains retreat. Traditionally, it's done in the summertime in India, but people use different calculations. The reason for summertime, so which would be for us December, January, February, hot period, is that there's more insects out and about, so you stay put, and so you're less likely to harm too many beings by not traveling and going out and about. That's what was one of the purpose for it. Anyway, so going to those places, and it's just like this exquisite energy. It's like if anyone's been to Uluru, that's got profound spiritual energy there. The first time I went, I was like, whoa, this place is powerful. You feel the power. And of course, there are those that say that Uluru is Copper Mountain, Guru Rinpoche's abode. So, just never know, do we? Yeah. So, by making offerings and undertaking pilgrimage, it sort of benefits our spiritual progress. So it's really, really encouraged. I have a friend of mine, a nun who's passed away, but in the last couple of years of her life, Lama Zopa Rinpoche encouraged her to do as much pilgrimage as possible, which she did, because it's quite profound, the benefits. And then on top of that, if you're also doing practices there, it's very, very powerful, like at Bodh Gaya. So normally to have an ordination of, you have 4 fully ordained. At Bodh Gaya, you need 8 because it's such a power place. So that's pretty incredible. Yeah. So, just that's how it is. And having just been on pilgrimage, I can say, you know, I was talking about it yesterday, because it's my topic of conversation at the moment, but I was talking about it to Chandra, who's from India, and talking about, you know, the difficulties traveling on the roads and driving through floods and all of this, and just wondering if you're ever going to get there, and, you know, going 12 hours to see a monastery. But when you go there, like, well, you know, it's like, it's worth it, right? It's worth it. Really, really worth it. And yeah, just the impact and the inspiration of like going to like Tabo Monastery, where Rinchen Sangpo, who was the translator, who was sort of in the expedition to bring Lama Atisha into Tibet. And so the couple of monasteries that he established are still operating today. And you're just like, wow, that's like 12th century until now, 12th century up till now. And you can tell by the stones, they're so, you know, worn down. They're really, really soft. Cool, because we were there in summer, it was very nice, but a little bit slippery, you know. Yeah, it wasn't good in the rain. So, you know, but very, just so inspiring. And you think how many beings have been there and built up that positive energy. I'm going to in Papin to in Nepal, cave where Guru Rinpoche meditated for 8 years. And again, you go in there and your mind is just so calm immediately, like you just want to stay there forever. But there's another group waiting outside to get in, so you've got to, you know, move on. Okay, so this, yeah, so contemplating the qualities, like of the Buddha. So Buddha, fully awakened, has developed all the positive qualities and has eliminated all the disturbing states of mind or the afflicted states of mind and the causes, so they can never arise. No matter what happens, they can never arise in that mind. So in the King of Prayers, just reading one verse, on every atom are Buddhas numberless as atoms, each amidst a host of bodhisattvas, and I am confident the sphere of all phenomena is entirely filled with Buddhas in this way. So the idea that there are Buddhas on every atom of space, not that we can see, but it's quite a, or at least I can't, it's quite a refreshing thing for our minds, you know, to think, oh, there are Buddhas here offering me protection, guiding me, and so forth. And that anytime we're engaging in virtue, the Buddhas are just like showering down blessings and smiling and so joyous and so forth, that we're engaging in it. So right now, it's like that. And you sort of, you read this and, you know, of course the mind says, but I can't see it, you know, am I just, you know, the Buddha said, don't accept anything on blind faith, check with your experience. But I do know when the jade Buddha statue, which is now housed in Bendigo at the Great Stupa, was travelling around, particularly in Asia, and people took a lot of photos, and you saw these layers and layers and layers of mandala lights. So the mandala represents a whole universe. So these were like layers and layers and layers of that. And it's like, okay, that shows you, because a mandala is the abode of a Buddha, you know, like it's the celestial abode of a Buddha. So it's sort of like, by deduction, you can say, wow, the camera could catch it. We couldn't with our bare eyes. But I do remember in Sydney, when the jade Buddha was in this one place, and we went along and doing practices, and it just, I felt like a giggly schoolgirl, you know. There was just this lightness and light and all of this. And people from the Blue Mountains said they could see the lights glowing there at night with all that was going on. So it was quite, and again, people took photos and they were those mandala lights. So yeah, it's good to take photos, because we can capture things that we can feel some sort of energy, but we can't see. I'm not saying it will, like, it's not a guarantee. Sometimes you do see that. Yeah. So we Okay, so we will look at some specific qualities of the Buddha. But the ultimate Buddha jewel is our own, the ripening of our own Buddha nature, that is fully developed. So it's our enlightened mind, our enlightened Buddha mind. But since we're not there yet, we have to rely on the conventional Buddha, the physical manifestations of enlightenment in our life, whether that be His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And Tibetans have ultimate faith that the Dalai Lama is the Buddha, Chenrezig. And even then, maybe we don't have to doubt that, even if you see, 88-year-old monk, that's what I see, I assure you. But we're attracted by the energy, many beings, so many beings, millions of beings attracted by the energy. I'm just talking humans. But when Kadrala first saw His Holiness in the Dharamsala in a car, and she saw surrounded by all these arms, what did she see? She saw directly the Buddha Chenrezig. So she's at a different level. That's what she saw. Because that's what she described. She said, I saw this being with all these arms. She didn't say, I saw Buddha Chenrezig. She didn't say that. She said, she described what she saw. So when we have that sort of pure view, that's what we would see, just like here, Buddha Chenrezig. So it's come out of people's realizations. They're not just like, oh, we'll make it look like this because that represents this and that. It's actually come out of the realizations of beings. So for us, whatever, a Buddha manifests in whatever form is going to benefit others, beings, so to connect to beings. If we look at on the wheel of life, you'll see there's a Buddha in all the different realms of existence. But if you're in a hell room, you're going to be taking on a hell realm being's body, or there's many stories of Buddhas taking on animal bodies, often dogs, like Maitreya, and story about His Holiness emanating as a dog, and all sorts of things. Could be any being in the animal realm. Yeah. Okay. But if you read the Jataka tales, actually, there's many different ones in there. Okay, so to look at the qualities of a Buddha, and this quote is from Maitreya, who's a really well-known, famous poet in India in the 1st century, and he was Hindu. And then he met Aryadeva. Hello, nothing happens by chance. So, and then by following or reading Aryadeva's teaching, listening to Aryadeva's teachings, he then became Buddhist. And he said, take refuge in whomever has absolutely no shortcomings, absolutely no blindness, and in whom resides every aspect of good qualities. Of course, we have to not take this too literally, absolutely no blindness. I mean, they could be physically blind, not a problem. Okay, that's okay. When it says it's no, like they have the clarity of mind, there's no like blind spots somewhere there in the mind at all. And in whom resides every aspect of good qualities. So we also talk about every aspect of good qualities being in every atom of their being, every cell and so forth. When you think of this, respect those who, here it says praise him, we can say that's referring to Shakyamuni Buddha, but Buddha Tara, I mean, can be female, can be male, and abide by their teachings. Okay. So when you find someone like that, take refuge in them. So some of the qualities that are unique to a Buddha is that the Buddha is free from all fears. Now, to my mind, it's like, yep, free from fear, that sounds pretty attractive to me, because how much, we can observe for ourselves how much of the day and do, anxious, fearful thoughts arise, or do we respond from that space, fearful to speak out, to be the one to say something, or to do something, or fearful of what other people think, whatever we're fearful of, or bungee jumping, I'm not sure. We've got a lot of fear on board, yeah, right? Animals have even more fear on board because that's a major factor of existence in the animal realm is your life, propelled by fear, literally for your life, fearful of being killed by something bigger, whatever. So the Buddha's free from all that. When we visualize the Buddha sitting on the golden throne, which this Buddha statue will be sitting on once we're having a Guru Rinpoche statue that is on its way to us, and it's going to be taller than where the Shakyamuni Buddha is. As Geshe Sopa advised us, everything has to go up to that level, including Lama Tsongkhapa and the two sons, so they'll all be elevated up. Yeah, there's lots more. Tara's going to be elevated. Everyone's going to be elevated. Us too. Yeah, lots more work to do. It's wonderful. Yeah, so when we do visualize that, it says on the corner, like square throne with all the jewels radiating out, which represents realizations. And then on each corner, we have a pair of snow lines, front, the sides, the back sides, and the back. And it's like they're raising up and holding up the throne. And it's said to be their bodhisattvas, but they're fearless bodhisattvas, jigme, fearlessness. So they have gone beyond fear. The Buddha is ultimately the one who's free of all fears. On top of that, the Buddha has the ability to free all other beings from fear. So when we talk about the perfection of generosity, for example, we talk about the generosity of giving material goods, medicines, shelter, food, so forth. The generosity of giving the Dharma, of giving love, of giving protection from fear. So the Buddha knows how to give that protection from fear. And this is, as we've discussed, what taking refuge is. It's having confidence that the Buddha is able to protect us, not from the noisy neighbor or the this or the that, not these sort of mundane things, but to protection for our mind. That while we engage in Dharma, while we're listening to Buddha's teachings, all of these things, we say mantra itself is protection for the mind. So the Buddha's got the means to offer us the ultimate freedom from fear. In other words, guide us to that state, to be free from fear. And I just think, wow, look forward to that. If we think about, just that perfection of generosity, I was thinking how Lama Zopa Rinpoche has, demonstrated such qualities as like offering protection for animals. We have these animal sanctuaries, and Rinpoche would always stop on the road and do mantras for the ants and do a puja for them. And the attendants would be saying, please, ants, don't come inside. We want to get some sleep. That's what I heard from Geshe Sopa. And like that always sort of in his gaze, not missing any sentient being that appeared to his gaze, and offering pujas and protection and so forth for them, including all of us. And also, on the material generosity, like remember Venerable Roger speaking at one point, we asked him to come and give a talk about FPMT, and FPMT started in Seti. He talked about the early days of Kopan, and when he was Lama Yeshe's attendant, when Venerable Roger was Lama Yeshe's attendant, and Lama Yeshe would say, go and get those offerings off Sopa before he gives them all away. And he said, I never got there in time. Including, like, when they had to go to the airport and Venerable Roger comes in and Rinpoche has given his lower robe, shantap, away. And it's like, you have to scurry around and get one because they're going to the airport. Oh, I guess she needed it, you know. A couple of my friends, anyway, they'd given Rinpoche some malas to bless. Often people do. They, you know, could you bless this? And then they went to pick up the malas, and Rinpoche says, "Oh, sorry, I've given them all away." So you really have to let go. It teaches us great lessons, right? And you know, not holding on to a thing. Nothing would stick to the palm of Rinpoche's hand. Everything would be, you know, for the benefit of others. So that's an amazing quality. And Benefit has great compassion for all living beings, whether or not they are close to him, her. So whether or not they're connected with the Buddha's teachings. Well, we say close, and we're not talking about within this physical proximity, but being close in terms of heart practice and so forth. They may not be the slightest bit interested. In Sydney, when His Holiness was giving the coloured chakra empowerments, this was in 96. So we were in the Horden Pavilion, and next door was the soccer stadium, and there was this big soccer, it was probably a final or something going on. And so we're all going in here, and people are complaining about, oh, it's terrible getting into the car park, there's too many soccer crowds, and thinking, but we're coming here to do something really pure and wonderful, and they're going to the soccer, you know, our judgmental minds. And His Holiness, the first thing he said is, what's the soccer score? Just cut through us like that. Brilliant, right? He says they're pretty concerned about those playing soccer and those attending. Probably not really caring about the score, but maybe he was. Okay. And the Buddha fulfills the aims of all living beings, whether or not they've helped him. So usually we say, have harmed, helped, or do neither. That equally, the Buddha can't help but have compassion for all beings. The Buddha sees our suffering long before we do, and the ways of suffering that we're not aware of that we're suffering, and just has infinite compassion for that. And then, so this is summarized in the Lamrim outlines, the outlines for the Kopan course, which you've done. So the 10 powers of a Buddha, the power of knowing the consequences of all karmic actions. So we have talked how only a Buddha knows karma in detail. Like, of course, we get some idea of the workings of karma, and probably more and more, but the consequences of all karmic actions. So that way, Buddha's able to maybe even circumvent actions, like we've seen that we hear the stories of the Buddha on the ship where the captain's plotting to kill the 500 crew. Not quite sure why. We never hear why. Why would you kill your crew? But anyway, look, story goes, and maybe they were going to mutiny. Fear of mutiny, whether it was going to happen or not, the fear in the mind. In any case, the Buddha, knowing that mind and knowing the consequences of that action, not only would those 500 be killed, but also this one would have the karma of killing those 500. So instead, he killed the captain. Right? Doesn't mean he was quite prepared to be thrown into jail, let us say. However, to prevent that from happening. Right. Now, this is not for ordinary beings to undertake. It will not stand up in a court of law. No. Just telling you. I was saving dream on. That's not going to happen. But that Buddha knows and knows the time, knows the skillful means. It's weighs up the whole situation, so can do things or say things or not do or say because of knowing the consequences of our, not of the Buddha's karmic actions, but of ours. And the power of knowing the previous causes for all karmic results in detail. The causes, the many causes that go into, usually when we look at, oh, that was because I got angry, but we don't know all the different things that played into that, getting that hit, or the, getting someone being angry at us, or whatever happens. So we don't know the whole ramifications of that. A Buddha does. And so the beauty of that, when I think about Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the number of times giving us advice, like when there was a few years ago, and I was at Chenrezig, it had been 2018, there was, 2019 it must have been. Anyway, so we had to accumulate worldwide so many recitations of the Kshitigarbha long mantra. And the intent was to avert the impact of earthquakes, because it was being predicted. There had been. It wasn't when we had the Japan one, and there was that whole Pacific Rim consequences followed on. I know it was San Francisco. Anyway, so there was this worldwide collective. We had to accumulate so many million by this date in February. That's what I do remember. So I remember we were doing it every day. And it's like, how would you know that that practice would be effective? Just like with COVID, Rinpoche gave the transmission of the Thubten Gyalpo prayer to pacify disease and famine and war, but particularly the disease one. Thubten Gyalpo in Tibet had, in Sakya Monastery, I think it was the 13th century by memory, had pacified the pandemic there. We say epidemic because it was just in that area. Anyway, the epidemic there, when no other means could do that. And so through the power of his practice. So, we were doing that. That's how the prayer-a-thon of the monks and nuns of FPMT on my prayer on Saturdays started. And for a few years, we were doing that 24 hours. And now we're doing prayers in accordance with the times advised by Rinpoche. We do like Guru Rinpoche prayers and mantras and so forth, the Heart Sutra. In accordance with the times is particularly looking at the war, Ukraine-Russia war, and particularly Putin. So to pacify his mind, I mean, that's our intent. Of course, only he can pacify his mind. And it's not just him, the whole, sort of everyone involved with that, all the causes involved. So it's not saying because a Buddha knows that you just sit back and do nothing. Because a Buddha knows that, it's sort of like, if you want to lessen the impact, okay, that's come to fruition, but we can, do things to lessen the impact and the conditions around that through the power of practice. And we have faith in those practices, and people go to their lamas and ask advice for certain practices, for certain things going on. And because, it's knowing that in detail, precise detail, what's going to be exactly right at that time for that person. The same person at another time, something else could be the right thing to do, or another person with the same situation, something else could be. So to know all of that. The power of knowing the various wishes of all living beings. So our aspirations, because that's what we have to connect with, somebody's aspirations. And this is something we can practice with our friends and families. We know we know some of what their aspirations are, and how to encourage and support that, as long as it's a wholesome thing. If they want to buy a house, we're not going to talk them out of it unless they have no money. And it would be an unwise thing, unskillful thing to do. But generally it's like, well, let's, in our minds, we can think, may you find a place that's the most, makes you happy, whatever. We don't have to get on our high horse about what really gets happiness or anything like that, even to ourselves, right? Enjoy it. Even like a couple of Dharma friends, long-term Dharma friends, and they were moving from Sydney to the Blue Mountains, and they'd seen this particular house and they really wanted that house. I have to say we were dedicating prayers for them to get that house. And then they got that house and said, see, it was all the prayers. Who knows? But generally I say, you know, maybe ask for something a bit more. Well, you need that house. Their house was filled with Dharma practice and Dharma images and tankas and statues and so forth. So you could say, you know, they were looking for their mandala, celestial abode, which they are now having to move out of, have moved out of, but nothing lasts. No, the owner had something in mind. It happens when you're renting. We just got to say there's no permanence here. Okay, so the power of knowing the various predispositions of all living beings. So what our interests are, and whether we have a predisposition, say, to study or to do retreat or make offerings, do rituals. This in the context of those who are Dharma practitioners. I think whichever retreat, there was a retreat in Bendigo, must have been the second one with Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and they had the CPMT meeting and then the retreat. So in other words, we were there for 6 weeks or so. Now CPMT is like the coming together. It happens every few years of the directors of all the centres and spiritual program coordinators and teachers, whatever, from around the world. And so that was held in Bendigo. So that was, I think, 2 weeks, maybe, let's just say, or a week and a bit of a break, and then we had the retreat. And it's like Rinpoche gave everyone jobs to do, right? So there was one nun who's good at drawing, writing, all of that. And so she was making, or with help, big banners of mantras to hang down inside the stupa, just for that period of time. They're not still there now. But it was when the stupa, inside of the stupa was just a shell. And, you know, somebody else was doing signs on the path. So you've got all these cute little kangaroo signs and elephant messages, and plus the elephants and the kangaroos, and, you know, making those. And it was like everyone was a buzz. And I thought, wow, if we lived in Rinpoche's monastery, this is what it would be like, you know, if this was like, welcome to the monastery. Now you're going to do this over there and you're going to do that. It was all a buzz of people doing things and different things according to their dispositions. You know? Of course, Rinpoche has never asked me to pick up a pen or draw, paint. You wouldn't want me in that area. For sure. Okay. So the various, knowing the scope of all living beings. So here we look at the 3 scopes of, you know, the Buddha taught the 4 Noble Truths, which is common across all traditions, Theravada and Mahayana equally. Vajrayana comes into Mahayana, but across all traditions. So there are many teachings that are shared that we all agree upon, that are shared. And so the Buddha taught first the ones to be shared in such a way that you would connect with it according to your goal. You know, if your goal is Buddhahood, you kind of come from a Mahayana perspective in relation to that. If your goal is liberation, you're going to come more from, today we'd say, Theravada, focus on that. But it's the same teachings. And then, of course, the Buddha realizing those who are ready for the tantric teachings, those who are ready for Lojong teachings, mind training, those ready for the Mahayana teachings, you know, the bodhisattvas in training, those who have that aspiration to become a Buddha. The power of knowing the spiritual parts of all living beings covers the same thing, really. Except the scope is like whatever your, because the other part of that, of course, all of us are going to eventually attain Buddhahood, and that's what we ask for. Please remain until samsara ends, until there's no more beings in samsara. In other words, till all beings achieve Buddhahood. However, what is, you don't, if somebody's learning to swim, you don't throw them in the deep end of the pool and say, swim. First of all, you don't even get in the pool, do you? From my memory, we were out of the pool and learning all these things before we even got in the pool. So it's like that. And then you sort of shallow end, gradually, you build up your capacity for going further. So that is actually what happens, Those who attain liberation, even they follow the path to liberation, and they're in that peace of nirvana, bliss of nirvana. At some point, the Buddha taps them on the shoulder and they progress further along the path. So that happened at the time of the Buddha, and it's happened ever since, that those who follow the path and attain arhatship then progressed on the path to attain Buddhahood at the very time of the Buddha. The power of knowing the different meditations appropriate for the liberation of each being. So this is the different, what is appropriate to give you right now. I'm not going to say, let's start with meditating on death when we have to first of all think about the value of this human existence and why it's so important. So knowing what somebody's ready for. So again, going for advice, and you might be told certain practices, someone else might be told certain other practices. You might be told to go and retreat, somebody else is told go and study the Lamrim. Whatever, none of it is like, oh, because you're not good enough. It's like, this is going to be the most appropriate thing for you right now. Or as His Holiness also said, if you're Christian, be a good Christian. If you're Muslim, be a good Muslim. If you don't have a faith, be a good person, because that's what those people are ready to hear. He said, don't become a Buddhist. It's sort of like, have you really fulfilled your goal within your faith that you have a connection with right now in this life? The power of knowing the previous lives of all living beings. So knowing exactly where we've come from, knowing, and this is what the Buddha did first sitting under the Bodhi tree at Bogaya. First quarter of the night, knowing all his own past lives. Second quarter of the night, knowing the past life of every living being. How many living beings are there? Gazillions. Every living being, individually, not just all those type of ants had this, no, this ant, that ant, the other one. I mean, inconceivable, right? But just knowing exactly their mind stream. Incredible. Just thinking when people go to the counselor therapist, it's usually like the first session or maybe more, it's like, okay, we'll take down your history. The Buddha would be just, don't need a history, right in there. It's like that when you go to the Tibetan doctor. I went to the Tibetan doctor in Delhi, and they just do your pulse, and then he said, oh, you've got aches and pains there and there. I went, yeah. Yeah, I do. He didn't have to ask me anything, It was like he just told you. Pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. So like that, a Buddha. So like they know our body, Buddha knows our mind. The power of knowing the body leaving process and death and rebirth of all living beings. So we talk about our throwing karma that throws us into this life, and that we say our throwing karma determines the length of that life. But then this is saying the Buddha knows how and when and whatever your death will occur. if you think about Lama Atisha going to Tibet, and before he went, he prayed to Tara, asked Tara what to do. And Tara predicted that it would be very beneficial to go to Tibet for the world and look at it in terms of the Dharma. But his life would be shortened by 20 years. So a Buddha can perceive that. How does a Buddha know? Well, we don't have to answer that question. A Buddha knows. Okay. You know, I mean, I very rarely did have, well, I did have a few interviews with Rinpoche, precious interviews, but maybe it was the last one. And Rinpoche was at Vajrayana Institute, and this ended, it was definitely the longest. It was actually quite a substantial bit of time. The first thing that Rinpoche asked me was, how is your mother? That year my mother died. Cool. Never asked before anything about my mother. But you know, the mother is the most important. It's just like, how is your mother? I was caring for my mother at the time. So it's like, okay. I thought, maybe I should have asked a subsequent question. Best not to know, really. Then I would have angsted about the truth. Yeah. Okay. So, you know, again, you know, thinking of different stories that we've heard about the person who wanted to do the prostrations above Gaia and requested Rinpoche 3 times, and Rinpoche was saying 3 times to go and make satsas, and got the prostration board, went down to was on his way to the stupa, didn't even get there, fell flat on his back, broke his back, and ended up in a monastery making satsas. And so it's like trying to circumvent our own mishaps. But as Buddha said, I can't do it for you. I can just show you the way. If anyone tells you 3 times something, listen. I mean, if a Lama tells you 3 times is like, okay. For some of us, it might take once, just being told once, but some of us need that repetition. And as this student was writing in Mandala about it, saying, you know, that his own, you know, stubbornness got in the way of actually being able to hear the actual advice.
That's the lesson, isn't it?
That's the lesson. Yes. Yeah. The power of knowing the obstacles that have to be abandoned by each being. It's a bit scary, isn't it? I can see that. You've got a very long list. If you think of the Buddha Vajrasattva, when training on the path as a bodhisattva, had great difficulty, or he said, of maintaining the vows. And so then made that commitment, because when you're training on the bodhisattva vows, you make a commitment that then means it's sort of like your speciality when you become a Buddha. Of course, all Buddhas can do everything. But we go to Buddha Vajrasattva for that purification, because that's what Vajrasattva made, that commitment to help others who have, you know, deluded states of mind, pretty much all of us, but that who have difficulties with, you know, accumulating negativities. And so we do that practice. So the power of Vajrasattva, having gone through all those obstacles himself and talked about that, and then saying, you know, how he made it through and developed the practices specifically for that powerful purification. Okay. All righty. Any questions, comments? Okay, keep going. So then it talks about the 18 qualities of a Buddha not shared by an arhat. So an arhat is a being, when we talk about the Arya Sangha, it's those. They have a direct perceptual realization of emptiness. So here you could have attained that through following the path of liberation. You could have attained that as a bodhisattva and reached the Arya Bodhisattva grounds. So you have a direct perceptual understanding of of emptiness. And, those bodhisattvas, on those higher levels, on the 8th ground, have also, worked on perfecting the 6 perfections. They eliminated it said they're on the pure grounds. They've eliminated not just the afflicted states of mind and their imprints, so that anything that, removing the obscurations to attaining Buddhahood, like there's no imprint of anything in their minds that could cause them to fall back onto lower paths. So, in other words, they're highly advanced. And in terms of bodhisattvas, well on their way to Buddhahood, irreversibly on their way to Buddhahood. So that nonetheless, there are these qualities that only a Buddha has that they don't have. A Buddha's body doesn't have any displeasing qualities. Now, we've got to be careful when we hear displeasing qualities. It's in the vein of when His Holiness said if he came back as a female, she would have to be attractive. He could have said when I come back as a male, he would have to be attractive, because that's what a previous Karmapa did, was saying I have to be attractive by the conventions of the day. In other words, the human body you take. But if a Buddha has only good virtuous qualities, no matter how they physically look, it's those good qualities that outshine. It's what's, emanating from, radiating from their bodies, radiating from their minds that outshine. So that's what it means here. As we train, the Guru is Buddha. We train our mind of seeing our Guru as that, not looking for faults, not looking for. I'm sure if we look for faults, we'll find them, because where are the faults? In our deluded mind. And we will project that outwards. We do it all the time, friends, family, enemies, probably more. The animals we have an aversion for, and so forth. A Buddha's speech does not contain any exclamations. Of course, again, this is not saying, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche would go, wow, 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 amazing, amazing, amazing. It was to wake us up late at night when we're, wow, wow, wow. But it's also to get us rejoicing, how amazing, etc. That's a sort of exclamation of the power of the speech. But when you look at the qualities of a Buddha speech, of which there's 64, we won't be, but just a few of those qualities, when we're going through all 4, I think there needs to be another teaching on the 64 qualities of the speech of the Buddha. So the enlightened speech is moistening. We talk about the moistening effect of compassion, of bodhicitta, moistening our mind, making it less rigid. Sometimes it's not like just a sort of softly, gently. It's like mind-blowing. Your mind gets zapped. It's just like, wow, I never thought of things that way at all. Maybe that happens when we first come to the Dharma. Never considered things in that way. Never thought about future lives and the impact of this life on the future life, or a past life on this life. Never conceived of that. So it said, clean water can flow everywhere, soften the earth and make all growth viable. Likewise, a Buddha's speech enters everyone's ears in accordance with each person's disposition and either makes his or her positive potential germinate as roots for a purified state, Buddhahood, of liberation or enlightenment, or fosters whatever spiritual growth has already occurred. This is where it makes sense. If you're Christian, be a good Christian. If you're Muslim, be, because whatever spiritual growth you have, you want that to grow, to mature. And so that's the impact, regardless. I mean, the Buddha, His Holiness Dalai Lama was invited to give by Lawrence Freeman to give the John Main lecture, and that's the book, The Good Heart. So it was on the Gospels. Could you give a Buddhist perspective on the Gospels to all these monks and nuns and I guess lay people as well? Which he did, because he was requested to. And so giving that perspective, but not throwing out the scripture that they followed, and really coming to a meaningful place around that. It is smooth, just as a touch of divine heavenly clothes is soft and gives pleasure to the body. Likewise, when we hear a Buddhist speech, it gives us mental pleasure, similar to the luxurious comfort. It's not always like that either. It can be, but it does give mental pleasure because why? Because it is in sync with reality, and it's like, oh yeah, that's true. We affirm that. And if we don't, we debate. Good luck with that, because you have to be very fine in your debating skills, because we debate and we think, no, I'll just knock that down. But then it comes back, and then it's backwards and forwards. Enlightened speech goes straight to the mind. The mind finds it, which is, I was just thinking, Yangtze Rinpoche, the first time I was really looking forward to having teaching with Yangtze Rinpoche. And because I'd read the Practicing the Path, which is like a slightly more contemporary version of Pabongka Rinpoche's teachings, Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, on the Lam Rim. And it was I think it was like 2005 or something. So, I thought, oh, I really love that way of presenting because it's more contemporary. Hello. And then when I went to his teachings, it was like head and heart at the same time. It's like, how do you do that? That's a skill. Like you just felt it here. At the same time, he's giving these teachings that also appeals to the intellect. Amazing. In relation to the teachings, the mind finds it sensible, since it never speaks in a ridiculous manner or with ungrammatical or broken language. I'm not 100% in sync. I mean, some of the early Lama Yeshe speaking in slightly broken English could be ungrammatical. Yeah. But we connect with it, let's say. It is sensible. It's not ridiculous. It's sensible. It is perfectly correct for the dominating condition for its arising is the deep awareness that realizes reality, totality of reality, just as it is. Enlightened speech is unstained, since it is spoken on the basis of having got rid of all the root and subsidiary disturbing emotions and attitudes, along with their tendencies. So when we looked at mind and its potential, looking at the different mental factors that have been here, the disturbing ones all completely got rid of, not even a tendency towards that, completely purified. That's the Sangha. It is sparkling clear, since it never uses words or expressions not commonly known to ordinary people. There again, it can get very technical. So it's not like you haven't heard the words, but it's like, excuse me. Like, I don't know, it's become a bit of a joke, really. Maybe an urban myth. When somebody came out from the teachings, that teaching was great, but why is he always talking about Tibetan rice? Dependent arising, Tibetan rice. That's our mishearing. It's not the side of the teacher. Right? It brings harmony to the ear, since it has the power to vanquish all the out of tune outlooks of extremist positions. Yeah. Our extremist positions means the two extremes of, grasping at things as being permanent or annihilism. Nothing exists or everything exists just as it is. Okay. That's the first 8. There's 64. There's more. 64 is a sum. So you get the picture. Right? The power of speech, the power of that. A Buddha's mind never forgets anything. Anything. So if you met the Dalai Lama once, Lama Zopa Rinpoche once, in case of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, next lifetime, hopefully in this our lifetime, Rinpoche, even you've not met, will remember. You know, when Lama Yeshe passed, and well, when I saw was very young, people would tell stories about, it was like, for each one, their individual idiosyncrasies and so forth, that it was like he would reflect back or have that conversation, like continue on. It was very different for each one. And then when he was taken to Kopan, he knew his way around everywhere, went in the kitchen, knew the cooks, and, you know, all of this, knew it all. And people felt very heartfelt that, you know, Lama was back because they had this connection. Of course, he's manifested in a different life because these are different times, you know. So like that. Buddha never leaves his meditative concentration on reality, even when acting. So only a Buddha can do this. Stay in meditative equipoise, meditating on emptiness, and at the same time be acting for the welfare and engaging in enlightened activities for the welfare of others. For example, teaching. And so only a Buddha can do that. And this is indicated, as we see here in the Buddha form, of being at the same time in meditation, so the eyes half closed, and at the same time engaging in enlightened activities. That's the eyes half open, like looking, checking up, you know, looking around, being ready to help and helping, engaging in whatever enlightened activities are needed, and just thinking that the Buddha can emanate as many forms as the Buddha wants to, greater than the atoms of space. And so very busy at the same time, sitting there in meditation. And then we get one distraction and we're lost the plot. So, you know, bit of work to do. And a Buddha never leaves her meditative concentration on reality. No, that's all I just did. A Buddha does not experience any false appearances. So in other words, when, you know, these holy beings, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all of that, they're connecting with our purity, with our own Buddha nature. That's what they're responding to. It's this heart connection. At the public talk in Brisbane, where this woman, she had a disability and she was asking a question on behalf of people who shared her disability. And she was very, very tearful, so it was hard for her to get her question out. So, what's his name? Richard Feidler was facilitating, moderating, whatever you call. And he was next to His Holiness, and you could hear His Holiness. The Holiness said, "Too much affection." Then he called the woman up, gave her a big hug.
What else do you need?
What else do you need? And she calmed down and was able to ask her question. It pacified her.
You should be able to calm down after getting hugged.
Yeah, I know. To actually calm down, I'd be like, I have no more question. I mean, now I've gone from crying to over-excitation.
Just being stunned.
Oh, being stunned. Yeah, absolutely being stunned. Yeah, the fact that she could calm down. So he didn't overdo it. Just enough to calm her down. It suited her. Perhaps he'd do something else with you.
I was listening to a podcast months ago with Dan Harris, the American journalist.
Yeah.
And it was just his series of some time ago. And there was a very similar story of a lady who was sharing her experience of trauma.
Yeah.
And he asked her to come to the stage and
Hug.
And similar type of thing. And it was just the narrative that came up with it was very probably a very Western American narrative
Yeah.
around kind of.
Yes, I mean, I was just thinking, yeah. Yeah. It was very helpful to her. She could ask her question. Yeah. I know. And this is the sadness that that gaze, that, oh, this is not wrong and right. And it's actually, it's a totally appropriate thing to do.
And
yeah. So.
To each of the people which he felt he is very open about his own biases.
Yeah.
Does,
yeah.
You know, speak. And the people who have had his.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, the same happened with that young boy who, you know,
yes.
Because when that occasion happened where Dalai Lama kissed the young boy, that it had happened months and months before. The family, the boy was over the moon, the family were over the moon, and that it was, you know, coming from a place of purity, but our society says that's not acceptable. And I get why we say that, because if that's a role model to other people, just like who are lesser than that, you know, it's not okay at this time, you know, which is a sadness because, because, you know, that was greatly beneficial at the time, and there were no qualms from the families, and it was delight from the families.
And we know there's motivation as well.
Yeah, but, you know, you can't tell somebody's motivation. And so, yeah, we have those restrictions. We have those restrictions in schools, and for very good reason. So, sadly, there are beings who abuse a position like that. Yeah. A Buddha is never so indifferent as to not check who is ready to make spiritual progress and to help him or her accordingly. So we can think of that, you know, at whatever level of our capacity. And so if we think about our own, you know, what brought us to engage in the Dharma, and that way, like we talk about bodhisattvas hooking beings in. And even in one lifetime, for that to ripen in a future lifetime. So in that lifetime, it might be, well, I was just thinking about my sister. I think she's hooked. You know, because she's Christian. She definitely wanted to meet the Dalai Lama. She has. Has she pursued that as a path? No. That's fine. She's hooked. Just as a sort of example. She may have been hooked many lifetimes ago. The fact that she even wanted to meet the Dalai Lama. So my niece, same thing, before she was 18. Wanted to meet the Dalai Lama. She did, and she connected. I've got more hope for her in this lifetime. Not that we're trying to convert anybody. It's sort of like the seeds are there, and when the conditions arise, they ripen. So, you know, Buddha is able to bring us to that place. Yeah, and when we're ready, the teachings arise. Suddenly, when we're ready, the conditions arise. Oh, there's High River Buddha Center. I never knew you were here. Now I know you're here. Suddenly the conditions come together. And that's that. A Buddha's good intentions never decline. So even, you know, we have, you know, we can look at our own good intentions. I have all the good intentions. We were talking about this, about various things yesterday, and so, you know, people make those New Year's resolution. I'm going to get fit. I'm going to do this and that, as my brother said, who was, you know, jogging every day. Don't know if he's still doing that. He's a little bit older now, but he was jogging every day. And he said, you'd see everybody on the 1st of January. Second, third. But by end of 3 weeks, it was back to the same old crowd. And we seem to be like that. It's something about 3 weeks or 3 whatever bits of whatever. But our good intentions very easily decline. So a Buddha's good intentions never decline. They're always just as enthusiastic, get out and do the jogging. Even like we have the story of Chenrezig. saying, you know, if I ever lose compassion for living beings, you know, or if it ever wavers, may my body be split into 1,000 pieces. And that when after so long of you know, sort of engaging and meditating on compassion and so forth, and then taking a look around and going, oh, there's still suffering in the world, how terrible. Now, not really a wavering of compassion, but a little bit of despair creeping in. So he split apart. And then Amitabha, Buddha Amitabha came back, and because seeing that great compassion, you know, very kindly put him back together. Not only put him back together, those 1,000 pieces, but 1,000 eyes and 1,000 hands. You can do a lot if you've got 1,000 hands and 1,000 eyes. You can be very effective in a lot of different directions. So, and then of course Tara coming out of, you know, green Tara coming out of one tear, and the whole entourage of Taras, and then white Tara out of that. And Tara saying, don't worry, I'll help you. Swift energy of Tara to help liberate beings. So, you know, never giving up on those good intentions. Quite like the fact that Buddhas help Buddhas. Or bodhisattvas at the time. A Buddha's enthusiastic perseverance never gives up. And of course, we have the reminder from His Holiness the Dalai Lama of the never give up. You know, whatever happens in your country, whatever's going on, never ever give up. Now, I was just seeing, I've got it here somewhere.
Oh, it's here on this little hanging.
Oh yes, could you read it out there?
Just read it out.
Yes.
Never give up, no matter what is going on, never give up. Develop the heart. Too much energy in your country instead, developing the mind instead of the heart. Develop the heart. Compassionate, not just to your friends, but to everyone. Be compassionate. Work for peace in your heart and in the world. Work for peace. And I say again, never give up, no matter what is happening, no matter what is going on around you, never give up.
Yeah, no, but it's a nice one to recite every day. Yeah, we used to have a cards like with the Dalai Lama, a little flip card, and it had that on it. So, and there's the banners. Yeah.
That was Marlene's banner, was it?
That was Marlene's, yeah. She certainly embodied the never give up, didn't she? Yeah. You can't stop me. A Buddha's mindfulness of all beings never declines. So that awareness, that you know, holds, the Buddha holds all beings simultaneously in the Buddha's gaze. I remember sometimes people say, you know, they got a phone call from Lama Zopa Rinpoche saying something that was just about what was happening at the time. And it's like, really? You got a phone call from Rinpoche? Back in the day. Or you'd get an email, like, you know, that happened to me one time when I put a question, hadn't heard a response. And then I thought, it's okay, I don't need a response. Well, as soon as I made up my decision, I got an immediate response from Rinpoche, which was opposite to what my decision. Maybe if my decision was in line with what was most beneficial, I wouldn't have got that. But the fact that I had, and that's what they said, you know, if you don't hear from Rinpoche, keep doing what you're doing. It's okay. You know, that was a definite instance. I remember Venerable Holly saying, this is interesting, Karma, because I said, oh, don't worry, you don't need to bother Rinpoche. Here's Rinpoche's response, totally opposite to what I had decided. So thank you, Rinpoche. But, you know, Rinpoche is busy with all other things going on. And that's just like, oh, now she needs a response right now. Not the other bit of time before I'd made the decision. Yeah. A Buddha's single point of concentration never declines. A Buddha's wisdom, understanding, emptiness never declines. And having the two, having the two combined, you know, minds, you know, the power of the single point of concentration to enhance that wisdom meditative mind. Well, the Buddha doesn't need that enhancing. It's already totally complete. So the two are conjoined. A Buddha's enlightened qualities never decline. Again, we can relate all of these to ours. Not that our good qualities really decline, but they certainly waver. You know, we can be incredibly compassionate one moment and the next on the flip side. All the actions of body, speech, and mind of a Buddha are preceded by and carried out with deep awareness of both appearance and their absence of true existence. Maintaining his omniscient awareness, spontaneous and non-conceptual. In other words, having that direct perceptual realization of emptiness doesn't mean that you don't see things as they are. Seeing things as they are, but seeing it as a mere appearance. In other words, the combination of the conventional truth and the ultimate truth, the understanding of that and holding those both in mind at the same time. Whereas we like, oh yes, conventional truth, and then I have to analyze for the ultimate, and then if I meditate on ultimate truth, there's no way I can engage with conventional truth at the same time. That's good if we're in training, but the Buddha can. See it all as illusory at the same time as understanding that it's a mere appearance, understanding it's a mere appearance while engaging at the same time. It's not like everything blurry and, whatever. Everything is as it is. And so you can operate in the world, let's say, putting it at a crude level, but at the same time realizing it's empty of inherent existence. So that means there's no attachment to anything, anyone, anything. A Buddha see the past with his omniscience, neither being attached to it or hindered by it, so nothing gets in the way, nothing sticks. A Buddha sees the future with his omniscience, being neither attached to it nor hindered by it. So, for example, when His Holiness was asked, before the year 2000 about Y2K, and the world was supposed to come to an end then too because the computers couldn't go. Nor did I. Thankfully, it didn't happen for our benefit. But His Holiness was like, oh, well, if the world comes to an end, we'll just go somewhere else. It's like, okay, you can be in this world or another world. Easy peasy, right? Well, more recently, His Holiness said, if you, develop your mind and abide in a pure land, then you are somewhere else when the world comes to an end. A Buddha sees the present with his omniscience, neither being attached to it nor hindered by it. Yeah. So just a final quote from Lama Tsongkhapa: body born of 10 million virtues and excellences. So that's way beyond, we talk about the 32 major signs and the 80 minor signs, the 112 of the Buddha. And here Lama Tsongkhapa is saying 10 million virtues and excellences. So it's beyond our comprehension. Speech that fulfills the hopes of infinite beings. Because we're not just talking about our world system, we're talking about many, many different universes that haven't even yet been discovered by our scientific world. Mind that sees all knowables as they are. So it said anything that is to be known is known by a Buddha. Anything that can be known is known by a Buddha. Everything knowable is known by a Buddha. I pay homage to this head of the Shakya tribe, Shakya lineage. So showing his Lama Tsongkhapa, showing his respect for the Buddha, but also implying the whole lineage that comes, which is the Sangha community, which we haven't talked about, and we've come to an end. So just to mention, next week we do not have a class. By all means, if you want to get together and have discussion, You're quite welcome. Will you be here? I don't know. No, you won't be here. Or not. That's fine. You've got the readings now, so you've got a lot to read. But the following week, we will, so that'll be the 27th, we'll have the refuge ceremony, and our dear Yvonne is taking refuge for the first time. But it's also an opportunity to renew refuge vows, or to say, well, wasn't sure about that one, I might be ready for that one now. You know, that's all your own private business. But it's always a good opportunity to, we say, renew the vows. Those of us who've taken bodhisattva and tantric vows, there's a thing of renewing that every day and thinking, may anyone I've broken be restored, and may those I've kept be strengthened. So we like strengthening that. So you can think about it like that. And of course, we'll be rejoicing in the moment, maybe have a little party.
And if you just wanted to come along for a stick bead to see what happens, is that okay?
Yeah, it is. Anybody who wants to come along for a sticky bit can do that.
Is that the name?
Or instead of the class?
I think, yeah, so what we'll be doing, I'll be doing some teaching and then the refuge ceremony and then a little bit more teaching. So it's sort of wrap around. So there'll be teaching involved. Yeah, so that'll be wonderful. And if you're sticking around for the afternoon, looking at the Tara Puja, that's at 2 o'clock.
Would you like one of the sets of water bowls taken down so that you can do it tomorrow?
No.
No? Okay. And will we be needing labels for the Sangha?
Maybe. Yes, which we have to do now. We do our dedications. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the precious body mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In page 19, Long Life Prayer for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparably kind Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And then we turn to the swift prayer. We return a prayer for the, not a swift prayer, a prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Peerless teacher, an assembly of the children of the victorious one Shravakas and Practica Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all their objects of refuge of infinite lands. Please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings. Through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Then for Osal, page 23. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings, O foremost and holy Lama, to you for our supreme, O Lama, please, please live long. Thank you. Yes. So next, while I'm away, is